There's something I want to say before anything else, and I want to say it slowly because I think it's something you haven't heard clearly enough. Not recently. Maybe not ever. You understand things that the people around you don't. Not because you're arrogant, not because you've studied more or prayed more or tried harder, but because something in you has always been oriented toward depth, toward truth, toward the question underneath the question that most people never think to ask. And that orientation has cost you something. It's cost you relationships where you had to shrink. It's cost you conversations where you had to simplify. It's cost you years of sitting with things alone because there was no one in your immediate world who could hold the full weight of what you were seeing. And in the quiet of all that aloneness, a question has lived inside you, sometimes loud, sometimes barely audible. Am I right about what I see? Does it matter that I understand? Is any of this going anywhere? I hear the Spirit saying something today that I want to deliver to you with full weight. God has been waiting, not for your performance to improve, not for your doubt to disappear, not for you to finally get everything right. God has been waiting for someone like you to finally understand. And the word I hear is finally, as in, it's here, as in, it's you, as in, the waiting is over. By the end of what I share today, you'll know what that means. Not just as encouragement, as instruction. Because the understanding you carry was never meant to stay inside you. Stay with me. And before we go any further, I want to be honest with you about what you're going to receive by the time this video ends. By the end, you will understand why your understanding has always felt different from everyone around you. You will see what God has actually been looking for, and why it's not what most people assume. You will know why the isolation, the confusion, the years of pressing through without clear answers were not setbacks, but a very deliberate sharpening. And in part 2, there is one thing I'm going to show you that will completely change the meaning of everything you hear in part 1. I need you to stay all the way through. What I'm building here is layered, and each layer matters. Now let me start with something that I think is very specific to the kind of person watching this. There's a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't look like loneliness from the outside. You can be in a room full of people, part of a group, surrounded by voices and movement and laughter, and still feel it. That low, quiet hum of, I am carrying something that no one here can see. You've tried to share it. You've opened your mouth and started to describe what you sense, what you observe, what you know is happening underneath the surface of things. And somewhere in the middle of the sentence, you've watched the other person's eyes, not glaze over from cruelty, not drift away from disinterest, but from a genuine inability to follow where you're going. And you've learned over time to stop trying. Not because you doubt what you sense. You stop trying because you finally understood that not everyone has the capacity to hold what you carry. That realization, as wise as it is, didn't make it easier. It just made it quieter. Here's what I want to name, because I think it's more common than people acknowledge in someone at your level of awareness. Your body has been signaling something for a while now. And I don't mean in dramatic ways, I mean in the small, daily ways that are easy to explain away. The first thing is what I'd call a changed tolerance. Things that used to feel normal now feel suffocating. Conversations that once felt fine now drain you in the first 5 minutes. Environments you used to move through easily now feel like too much noise, too much performance, too little substance. And you might have wondered if something is wrong with you. Why you can't just enjoy things the way you used to. Why the people who were once enough no longer are. The second thing is those emotional waves. Not depression, not anxiety, not exactly. Just these unexpected surges of feeling that come from nowhere. A piece of music, a sentence in a book, a moment of quiet in the middle of a busy day. And suddenly you're full, or hollow, or both, at once. And you can't explain it to anyone, because you can barely explain it to yourself. The third thing is your dreams. They've been more vivid. more searching, like you're looking for something in them, or being shown something, or standing at the edge of something you can almost name, but not quite. You wake up and the feeling stays with you longer than a normal dream does. And the fourth, the one I think you carry most quietly. You know things before there's evidence for them. You saw things coming in relationships before the signs were obvious. You sensed shifts in situations before anyone else registered them. And instead of trusting that, most of the time, you've second-guessed it. Talked yourself out of it. Waited for proof before you let yourself believe what you already knew. Here's what I want you to understand about all of this. None of that is malfunction, not the change tolerance, not the emotional waves, not the searching dreams, not the early knowing. All of it, every single signal, is a marker, the first marker that you are exactly the kind of person this message is for. And now, here's what nobody told you about why this happens. And this is where it starts to get important. Let me explain something that most spiritual content never really addresses. There are broadly three kinds of people on a spiritual journey. The first kind believes because it feels good, because it brings comfort, because the community is warm and the words are uplifting and the feeling of belonging matters to them, and there's nothing wrong with that. But this kind of faith is fragile. When it stops feeling good, when the season gets hard, when the community disappoints or the prayers seem unanswered, this kind of person struggles to stay, because they were never anchored in understanding. They were anchored in feeling. The second kind believes because of habit, because they were raised in it, because the structure is familiar and the rhythm of it gives shape to the week and the year. And habit can carry a person through seasons where feeling fails, but habit without understanding is fragile in its own way. When the structure is disrupted, when life asks a question the habit doesn't have an answer for, this kind of person can feel completely lost. And then there's a third kind. The kind who believes because they have come to understand, who have sat with the hard questions long enough to find something real on the other side of them, who couldn't accept the surface version, not because of pride, but because something in them needed to go deeper, who asked the question underneath the question and stayed in the discomfort of not knowing until something true emerged. That third kind is rare, and that third kind is always the most isolated, because depth is solitary by nature. You can share a feeling with a crowd, you can share a habit with a family. But genuine understanding, the kind that comes from years of pressing through confusion and coming out the other side with something real, that is not a group activity. That is a solitary formation, and the world we live in does not reward this. Think about everything you've been conditioned toward. Perform quickly, learn for the test, produce measurable results, move on to the next thing. The whole design of modern life moves against depth. It rewards speed, it rewards surface fluency. It quietly punishes the person who slows down to actually understand something before accepting it, which means that everything in you that has always moved toward depth, toward real understanding, toward the question underneath the question, has been moving against the current of everything around you. The person who believes because it feels good stops when it stops feeling good. The person who believes because of habit loses their footing when the structure falls. But the person who genuinely understands, that person stays, through the seasons that make no sense, through the years where the evidence is absent and the only thing they have is what they have genuinely come to know. That's what you've been doing, and that is not a small thing. Your isolation is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It is evidence of how rare the thing you carry actually is. And if that's true, the next question becomes obvious. Who designed it, and what for? Let me look at something that I think is often misunderstood about the way God works. When you look at the people in Scripture who were used for something significant, there is a pattern. And the pattern is not what most people assume. Most people think God chose the strongest, the most devoted, the most consistent, the most externally impressive. But look closer. Joseph was not chosen because he never had doubt. He was thrown into a pit by his own family and sat in a prison for years. What made Joseph usable was not his perfection. It was his capacity to read what was happening beneath the surface of events when everyone around him only saw the surface. In a moment when the most powerful man in the world was confused, Joseph was the one who understood. Daniel was not chosen because he was fearless. He was chosen because, in a culture designed to reshape his thinking, he had developed the capacity to understand things at a level that the most educated minds around him could not access. When the king needed someone to interpret what no one else could, Daniel was there. Esther did not enter her position through dramatic power. She entered it through understanding the right moment, understanding the weight of what was being asked, understanding when to speak and what to say, and how the whole situation had been arranged long before she arrived in it. The pattern is not strength. The pattern is not performance. The pattern is comprehension, a capacity to understand what is actually happening at a level that others cannot reach. And here is what I need you to sit with. God is not only searching for people who obey, because obedience without understanding is fragile, in the same way that feeling-based faith is fragile. What God has been building in the people he intends to use for something that actually matters is the capacity to understand, to comprehend not just the instruction but the weight of it, the timing of it, the reason behind the reason. And that takes time. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be manufactured in a weekend retreat or downloaded from a playlist. It is built slowly, in the hard seasons, through the questions that don't resolve quickly, through the years of pressing forward without quitting. Think about every time you chose to understand, instead of simply reacting. Every time you stayed in a difficult question when the easier thing would have been to reach for a simpler answer. Every time you sat in the discomfort of not knowing because you refused to accept a version of something that wasn't actually true. Every time you chose depth over comfort, even when depth cost you more. Every single one of those moments was seen, not as evidence that you were struggling, as evidence that you were being formed. And I want to name something else, because I think it sits underneath a lot of what someone carrying this kind of understanding experiences. You have probably wondered, more than once, if you've been getting it wrong, if the depth you've been moving toward has been leading you somewhere real, or just further into your own head. That doubt, and I want you to hear this clearly, that doubt is not your enemy. That doubt is actually part of comprehension. The person who never questions what they believe has never actually tested it. Your willingness to press, to ask whether what you sense can hold real weight, that is what produced genuine understanding. Your doubt was not a detour. It was part of the curriculum. I hear the Father saying something today, and I want to deliver it carefully, because this is not a casual statement. I hear him saying, finally. Someone who sees what I have been placing in front of them. Not finally as in you were slow, finally as in the formation has reached the moment where what has been built in you is ready to be named. Finally as in the preparation is completing. Finally as in this is the arrival. There is something I haven't told you yet, something that changes the meaning of everything I've just said. I'm going to show it to you in part 2, and I need you to stay. Let me come back to something I said at the end of part 1, because I don't want you to carry the wrong version of it into what I'm about to say. The word finally doesn't mean God just noticed you. It doesn't mean you were invisible before and you've now earned your way into his attention. What I hear is something entirely different. What I hear is the language of completion, of a preparation reaching its designated moment, not you finally got it right. But what has been built in you has finally reached the threshold of what's needed for what comes next. There is a distinction there that matters enormously. And understanding that distinction is what everything in part 2 is built around. By the end of what I share here, you will understand what finally actually means when God uses it. You will know the specific obstacle that stands between the understanding you carry and the breakthrough ahead, and what to do about it. And you will see the one thing that I believe is the real purpose behind everything you've been carrying, the thing that changes the meaning of all of it. So let's talk about waiting. Because I think the word waiting has been misunderstood almost universally in spiritual conversations. When we talk about God waiting, we tend to hear it through the lens of how humans wait, passive, uncertain, hopeful but unsure of the outcome, sitting with fingers crossed, not knowing when or if something will arrive. That is not the kind of waiting I hear about when I think about God's timing. The waiting I hear about is the waiting of a master craftsman who has a very specific project in mind and who will not reach for a tool until it has been sharpened to exactly the edge required. Not because the tool hasn't been good enough, because the edge wasn't yet ready for what the work demands. The sharpening is not punishment, it's preparation, and the waiting is not passive. The waiting is the sharpening. What has been happening in you in all the years of pressing through, of understanding more while feeling understood less, of carrying more weight than your environment could hold. That is not delay. That is precision sharpening. For something specific, for something that requires the exact kind of understanding that can only come from the process you have been through. Now, I want to name something that I think lives quietly in the background for almost everyone carrying this kind of deep comprehension. And I want to name it carefully because it's subtle. It is the fear that sounds like this: what if I've been understanding the wrong things? What if the depth I've been moving toward has been leading me somewhere, but not somewhere useful? What if I finally get to the place where I'm supposed to act on this understanding, and I freeze? What if I become visible and I can't hold the weight of it? That fear is real. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. And I'm not going to tell you to simply push past it, because that would be dishonest. What I want to say is this: that fear is not a sign that you're not ready. That fear is a sign that you understand the weight of what you carry. The person who walks into something significant with zero hesitation does so because they have no awareness of how much it matters. Your clear-eyed, sober awareness of the weight is exactly what makes you different from someone who would take this lightly. You are allowed to carry this weight before you have every answer about how to use it. You are allowed to move forward while the full picture is still completing. You are allowed to not know every detail and still be exactly the right person for what's coming. You are allowed to take the next step without it feeling like confidence and still have it be the correct step. The waiting is not over because you've arrived at certainty. The waiting is over because the formation is complete enough for the next phase to begin. And finally means now, not later, not when you feel ready. Now, which brings me to the part I've been building toward since the beginning of this video, the part that changes the meaning of everything. I need you to hear this slowly. Your understanding was never just for you. Stay with me, because I think that sentence is easy to hear and hard to actually absorb. So let me say it again, differently. The understanding you have developed through all the years of pressing through questions others didn't ask, through all the isolation that came from seeing what others couldn't see, through all the seasons that made no sense while you were in them, that understanding was never only meant to settle things for you personally. It was being developed through you, for what is coming through you, toward people who are going to need someone who genuinely gets it. Let me explain why that changes everything. Think about what you have walked through to arrive at the level of understanding you carry right now. The wilderness seasons, the questions that had no easy answers, the moments of profound confusion that you stayed in instead of running from, the relationships that couldn't hold your depth, the environments that felt suffocating, the years of moving towards something you couldn't fully name. All of that was not just your personal journey. All of that was your classroom. And you did not go to that classroom for yourself alone. There are people who are coming toward you, some of them already in your life, and some of them not yet, who are standing at the beginning of exactly the kind of journey you have already walked. And they are going to need someone who doesn't flinch at the hard questions. Someone who doesn't reach for easy comfort when what is needed is real understanding. someone who knows the terrain because they have already walked it in the dark. That is you. Specifically, precisely, deliberately you. Think about why leadership that actually helps people is so rare. It is rare because most people who teach or guide or lead only go as deep as the knowledge they've accumulated. They know things, but they haven't been through the formation that turns knowing into genuine comprehension. They can give information, but they cannot give presence. They cannot sit with someone in the middle of confusion and say, I know what this feels like, I have been here, and here is what is actually happening. You can do that. Because you have been there. Not in theory, in reality. Just because you sat alone with hard questions doesn't mean those questions weren't preparing you for something. Just because no one around you could follow where you were going doesn't mean you were going nowhere. Just because the formation was painful doesn't mean it was pointless. Your isolation was your classroom. Your confusion was your curriculum. Your questions were your credentials. What felt like being overlooked was actually incubation. What felt like delay was actually development. What felt like being forgotten was actually positioning. And I hear the Father saying this today, not as a general encouragement, but as a declaration over the specific person receiving this message. I hear him saying, I did not waste your understanding. I was sharpening it, because what is coming will require someone who can hold it. And I have been waiting, finally, for you to understand what it was being sharpened for. That is what finally means, not, you took too long. But, the formation has reached the moment where the purpose can be revealed. And the purpose is not only your personal breakthrough, the purpose is what your breakthrough makes possible for others. Now, before I bring this to a close, there's something practical I want to share with you. Because I think what I've been describing deserves more than a feeling. It deserves something you can actually work with. Here's something I've been sitting with, alongside everything I've just shared. The kind of understanding I've been describing, this deep, pattern-reading, truth-seeking comprehension that chosen ones are built with, that is not only a spiritual gift. It is also a function of how your brain was wired from the very beginning. And neuroscience has a name for what is happening when that function is fully activated. Researchers call it gamma brainwave activity. And researchers across institutions like MIT, Harvard, and Princeton have consistently found that gamma is the frequency associated with the highest levels of cognitive clarity, intuition, creative insight, and what scientists sometimes describe as the eureka state, that sudden, luminous knowing when things click into place. And here is the part I want you to understand. You were born with stronger gamma activity than most people. That is what made you a deep processor from childhood. That is why you learned quickly, felt deeply, and sensed things others didn't. But there is something researchers call the decline effect. Beginning around age 7, the systems of modern life, the school structures, the noise, the relentless pace, the pressure to perform rather than understand, begin to suppress that gamma activity. Not eliminate it, suppress it. Like a signal being buried slowly under static, which means the very capacity that was designed in you, that rare comprehension you were built for, may not be operating at the full level it was designed to operate at. Not because the ability is gone, because the frequency has been suppressed. A neuroscientist named Dr. Robert Lake spent more than 3 decades researching this exact problem. Not how to teach people to be smarter, how to restore what was already there. What he developed is a 7-minute audio track that uses a technology called brain entrainment to guide your brain back into its natural gamma state, not through effort, not through discipline, through resonance. You listen through headphones, close your eyes, and in 7 minutes, your brain begins to synchronize with the frequency it was originally designed to operate at. The standard price for this is $49, but because Dr. Lake wanted this in the hands of people who genuinely need it, rather than only those who can afford high-end neurofeedback therapy at $300 a session or home equipment at $7,000, He made it available for $39 for people who find it through a specific channel. The link I'm pointing you to is that channel. $39 delivered instantly to your inbox with a complete money-back guarantee. No conditions. No time limit. With it comes 4 additional resources: an audio track specifically designed for children's focus and confidence, the original book that the film The Secret drew its ideas from, a guided visualization across 4 key areas of life, and an infographic of the 5 most important habits for building what your understanding has been pointing you toward. One thing I need to say directly: there are sites selling what they call the genius song that are not the real product. They don't have the actual brain entrainment technology embedded. They are just audio files with no real mechanism behind them. The only place I trust for the real product, with the technology, the bonuses, and the guarantee fully intact, is the link in the description and in the pinned comment below this video. Do not search for it anywhere else. If you want to explore this, that is the only path I can point you toward with full confidence. The link is there whenever you're ready. Now, let me give you what I believe you actually came here for. Let me bring everything together. Because the things I said in part 1 look different now that you can see where they were leading. When I talked about your isolation, your changed tolerance, your vivid dreams, your knowing before evidence arrives, those are not just signs of someone who understands deeply. Those are signs of someone who has been in active, deliberate formation. Not for your personal comfort alone, for a purpose that extends past you. When I talked about the 3rd kind of person, the rare one who believes because they genuinely understand, that is not just a personality trait, that is a designation. That is the person God builds for the moments when shallow faith and habitual faith cannot hold the weight of what is being asked. When I talked about Joseph, about Daniel, about Esther, I was not describing distant historical figures. I was describing the pattern that has always been true, that is true right now, of how God shapes the people He intends to use for something that actually matters. That pattern is you. You are not someone who understands too much. You are someone who was given exactly the right amount of understanding for exactly the assignment ahead of you. You are allowed to stop apologizing for the depth you carry. You are allowed to stop shrinking in rooms that cannot hold you. You are allowed to stop explaining yourself to people who are not yet equipped to understand. You are allowed to trust the knowing that has been with you since before you had language for it. You are allowed to take up the full space of who you actually are. The understanding you carry is not a burden without purpose. It is a tool that has been sharpened for something specific. And that something specific is now arriving. I hear the Father speaking over you today, and I want to say this as carefully and as fully as I can. I hear Him saying, the years of confusion were not wasted. The seasons of isolation were not punishment. The depth that has felt like a curse was preparation. And the person I have been shaping through all of it, the one standing at this threshold right now, that is exactly the person I needed. The waiting is over. What felt like being hidden was incubation, and that is not random. What felt like being forgotten was positioning, and that is not coincidence. What felt like too much understanding for too small a space was preparation for a space that is now opening, and that is not without purpose. Finally, someone who gets it. Now go carry what you understand. Because somewhere, not far from where you are right now, there is someone standing at the beginning of exactly the journey you have already walked. And they are going to need someone who has been through it. Someone who doesn't flinch, someone who genuinely understands what they are carrying and can say, I know this terrain, I've walked it, and here is what is actually happening. That person is you. The preparation is complete, and the waiting is over.